What if the story the world believed was over never truly ended at all? What if the distance, the silence, the years apart were not an ending, but an intermission? And what if the secret meetings now whispered across fan circles are not coincidence, but the quiet return of something unfinished? Because once again, the names Wang and Shen are being spoken in the same breath, not on screen, not in a script, but in hushed conversations, blurred sightings, and moments that feel far too familiar to be ignored. For 3 years, the world was told to move on. Careers diverged. Images changed. Public narratives were rewritten with careful precision. Wang evolved into darker, more intense roles, carrying an edge shaped by experience and expectation. Shen matured into a presence defined by emotional depth and quiet strength. On the surface, their paths no longer intersected. But beneath the surface, questions never stopped forming. And then, the whispers returned. A private location. A familiar timing. Appearances that never overlapped publicly, yet somehow aligned too perfectly behind the scenes. No photos clear enough to confirm. No statements strong enough to deny. Just fragments, enough to reignite a fire fans believed had burned out long ago. Those closest to the DyShen story noticed immediately. Patterns that felt familiar. The same discretion that once surrounded them during the height of their fame together. The same careful avoidance of public overlap paired with unexplained proximity. To outsiders, it looked like coincidence. To longtime observers, it felt like history repeating itself. This story isn't over. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. We follow the moments and emotions of your favorite TV stars. Stay with us. Secret meetings are not loud. They are defined by absence rather than presence. By what is not posted. By schedules that suddenly become vague. By cities shared but never announced. And once again, Wang and Shen seem to exist in the same spaces without acknowledgement, an old rhythm resurfacing in silence. The question is not whether the rumors are dramatic. The question is why they feel believable. Because DyShen was never built on spectacle. It was built on subtlety. On energy that did not need confirmation to be felt. On moments that lingered even when words were withheld. And now, years later, that same energy is being sensed again. Not declared, not displayed, but quietly recognized. Fans revisiting old footage see it differently now. What once looked like youthful chemistry now feels like emotional familiarity. What once seemed scripted now appears instinctive. The bond that defined their on-screen story refuses to remain confined to the past, especially when present-day behavior mirrors old patterns too closely to dismiss. Yet caution hangs over every interpretation. Because in a world shaped by fame, privacy is both shield and strategy. Meetings can be professional. Timing can be accidental. Silence can be self-preservation rather than secrecy. And still, the unanswered questions grow louder with each unexplained overlap. Are they reconnecting? Are they rebuilding something privately that once collapsed under pressure? Or are fans projecting meaning onto shadows because the story never truly had closure? What makes this moment so powerful is not confirmation, but possibility. The idea that something unresolved might still exist. That two people once bound by extraordinary connection might find their way back, not to the spotlight, but to understanding. If they are meeting, it would make sense that they would do so quietly. DyShen has always existed in restraint. Loud declarations were never their language. Their story thrived in what was felt rather than said. And if something is being rebuilt now, it would likely happen far from cameras, far from commentary, far from the weight of expectation that once fractured everything. And perhaps that is the most compelling part of all. Not the idea of reunion, but the idea of choice. Choice to reconnect without performance. Choice to protect what once suffered from exposure. Choice to exist without explanation. Whether these secret meetings point to reconciliation, friendship, or simply unresolved emotion, one truth remains undeniable. Wang and Shen still occupy a shared space in public imagination because their connection never felt temporary. DyShen was never just a phase. It was a moment of emotional truth that refused to fade. And now, with whispers growing louder and silence growing heavier, the question returns, not as speculation, but as quiet anticipation. Are they back together? Or are they simply two people finally free to meet without the world deciding what it means? For now, there are no answers. Only echoes. Only patterns. Only the feeling that some stories do not end when we think they do, they wait. And if DyShen is truly unfolding again, it is doing so the only way it ever could. In silence. In secrecy. And in the space between what the world sees and what only two people know. And that space between what is seen and what is hidden is where the story grows most powerful. Because silence, when it comes to Wang and Shen, has never been empty. It has always been full of meaning, full of restraint, full of things deliberately left unsaid. In the years since their supposed separation, both stars learned what it meant to survive success alone. Wang stepped into roles that demanded intensity, authority, distance. His public image sharpened, his gaze colder, his presence heavier. Shen, on the other hand, refined softness into strength, choosing characters that carried emotional honesty and vulnerability with quiet control. They evolved separately, yet the emotional imprint of what they once shared never seemed to disappear. And perhaps that is why these alleged secret meetings feel different from ordinary rumors. This is not a loud scandal. There are no exposed messages, no dramatic leaks, no public slips. Instead, there is something far more unsettling. Consistency. Familiar patterns returning after years of absence. A kind of careful closeness that mirrors the past too precisely to be random. When two people have shared something real, separation does not erase recognition. It only delays it. Observers have pointed out how their movements echo one another. Appearances in the same cities within days. Private schedules suddenly undisclosed. Public events attended separately, but departed with suspicious timing. Nothing concrete enough to accuse. Everything subtle enough to suggest intention. And intention is where the heart of this story lives. If they wanted attention, it would be easy. One photo. One accidental glance. One careless overlap. But instead, there is discipline. Distance. A mutual understanding that whatever exists now must remain protected from the weight that once nearly crushed it. Because when DyShen first captured the world, it happened too fast. The love story on screen blurred dangerously with reality. Expectations grew louder than truth. Every interaction was analyzed, every smile interrogated. What should have been simple became unbearable. And perhaps that is the lesson time has taught them. That if something is to exist again, it must exist differently. Not for fans. Not for headlines. Not for narratives written by strangers. But for themselves. There is also another possibility, one just as profound, if not more. That these meetings, if real, are not about romance at all, but about closure. About two people who never truly got the chance to end things on their own terms. About conversations that were postponed because the world was watching too closely. About healing wounds that fame refused to let close. Sometimes the heart needs answers more than reunion. And yet, even that possibility carries emotional weight. Because closure between two people who once meant everything to each other is never simple. It requires trust, vulnerability, a willingness to reopen doors that were shut in pain. Which raises another question. Would they risk meeting again if nothing still mattered? The answer, for many, is no. You do not move in silence for something meaningless. You do not protect something that holds no value. And you do not recreate old patterns unless there is something unfinished pulling you back. This is why fans are watching closely, not with excitement alone, but with reverence. Because DyShen is not just a pairing. It represents a moment when two young stars met at the intersection of innocence, ambition, and unexpected emotional truth. And moments like that do not fade quietly. Whether these secret meetings lead to reconciliation, friendship, or simply peace, one thing is already certain. The story of Wang and Shen was never as simple as the public believed. It was never fully told. And it was never fully resolved. Perhaps the greatest twist is not whether they are back together. Perhaps it is that, after everything, they found a way to meet again, without noise, without pressure, without the world demanding answers. And if that is true, then this is not a scandal. It is a return to humanity. A reminder that behind fame, behind roles, behind images carefully curated for millions, there are still two people whose connection once felt real enough to shake an industry and quiet enough to survive its aftermath. So the question remains, hanging in the air where silence speaks loudest. Is this the beginning of a second chapter? Or simply the ending they were never allowed to have? Until they choose to speak, all we can do is watch the shadows, listen to the quiet, and remember that some stories are not meant to be revealed all at once. Some stories return slowly, and some hearts, no matter how far they travel, remember exactly where they began.